Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. My name's Josh, that's Al, and each week we talk about security risks. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. Echo there. Uh, Security risks, business, and yeah. Whew. Al, I'm kind of glad that we decided to postpone 24 hours to record
Yeah,
because the last 24 hours, I think the word fireworks does not describe the craziness of everything that is going on. Oh my. But before we get to that, I say let's just remind everyone ISC West is next week, so
sweet.
uh we probably have a slight off schedule for recording the podcast. Might be off. Let's see what happens. We'll try to get something done next
Yeah,
week.
we'll be on the floor, so we'll try to get some footage from the floor, some new tech and all that good stuff, and try to bring bring you guys some of the goodies that we see out there, some of the cool things.
I'm
Uh,
actually I'm actually really tempted to get one of those handheld cameras, basically,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
stream and record, a bird's eye point of view kind of thing. I mean, I'm debating it, but
Mhm.
who
iPhone
knows?
actually works pretty good for that. I'm not gonna lie. The new one's got a pretty good camera on it.
Oh, you're talking about that like that DJI Pocket?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
not too bad.
I was looking at that last night. It was really nice.
Yep. There's a lot of good tech out there right now. So the group chat has leaked. every every.
All right, we're gonna just do this. We're gonna declare it right now, okay? Let's just get it over it. We're gonna just rip the band-aid right off. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean the group of guys. You come home from a night out, and your significant other's like, "Hey, I'm on the group chat. What's all this nonsense mean?" Most guys' nightmare right there. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, the group chat's been exposed. Please don't judge me. But in this case, it wasn't the guys' group chat, like the boys. It was a National Security Council's group chat.
the the thing that astounds me, okay, in all this, okay, let's put all the political rhetoric aside and try to hold, Vance, Hesketh, Trump to the same standard that they tried to hold, the opposition to. Um, at some point, did it ever click or just go off in their mind that maybe we shouldn't be having these conversations on Signal? Um, that was like one of the biggest ones, and normal circumstances, I would say, yeah, I kind of deal, and it's like maybe they didn't know, but for crying out loud, you have the entire National Security Council on there. You have the director of the CIA, by the way, who's part of that, but you also have the chief of staff for the president of the United States, which is more or less the right hand of the president. And you also have the vice president, who you can say is the left or right hand, but both of them, those are like the two biggest political power figures you could have. And they're sitting in that chat. And at some point, does it like not dawn? I was like, hey, we're shut up. Let's take this to a skiff. Let's go talk somewhere else. Hey guys, we're not supposed to talk about this here. Like, no one said this. And that's concerning. That's like
Yeah,
deeply
I,
concerning.
I mean, so many things wrong with this. I mean, agree with you. Like, I mean, we should hold the government accountable regardless of our political leanings. Um, Objectively, we got to look at standards, and we got to look at operational, security and policies. And there's just no way you can skirt around it. I mean, this is you could be the the hardest core MAGA guy in the rightest, reddest corner of the planet, you got to look at this objectively and say this is this is a complete disaster. I mean, this shouldn't have happened. I mean, you can't excuse this is inexcusable on so many different levels. You know, irrespective of what side of the political spectrum you fall on, you got to look at this for what it is. It's just a complete OpSec failure. And I think even Fox News, which traditionally leans right, if you guys didn't know, I know most people know that, but even they're coming out here, they're slaying the image. I mean, this is ridiculous that this happens. Now, what am I saying? Like, we've talked about this earlier. Like, I'm not surprised that they had a group chat. I mean, yeah, we want officials in the government to communicate. It's not so much that they had a group chat. It's what they were putting on the group chat, and that's the tip of the iceberg here. Tip of the iceberg. They added a reporter, a journalist who has a public duty to report the news from again, I don't want to make this political, but the Atlantic is not known for its conservative values, just put it that way. The Atlantic tends to lean a little bit to the left. So why, fine, if you're going to add a journalist to the group chat, okay, questionable, but maybe there's a scenario for that if you're not discussing things. But you added the chief editor of a publication that's been very critical of your administration. Like, that's an unforced error, bro. Like, what are you doing?
Well, you
Like,
can't make the
I'm
you can't
sorry,
make
you
this stuff
can't
up.
defend that. You just can't defend that. It doesn't matter. Like I said, you could be the biggest, hardest, right wing, reddest corner of the planet. You cannot defend that.
Well, and I think there's several errors. Like number one, it's not like any editor you just added. You added the editor in chief, of the Atlantic. And by the way, even though the Atlantic may be a center or center left or left publication, depending on how you look at it, um, the editor in chief, Jeffrey Goldstein, is not typically your average editor. I think he also does the Washington Week on behalf of PBS, which tends to be more, center with a half step to the left, typically.
Right.
Not extreme left. They tend to be very center and they're very balanced.
Very fact-based journalism. Provide they don't go into a lot of commentary. They really analyze facts versus some of your more mainstream media outlets, which it's usually like 80% commentary, 20% fact. I think, PBS and yes, they do tend to they do tend to be a little bit more to the left than center, but I definitely agree with you. Like it's very much it's less commentary, more factual based, and you know more like it's more like analyzing a chess game when you listen to what they're saying. They you present moves and they kind of tell you, well, this is what I think this move is going to do. Here's the outcome of that move, right?
And it,
Versus
it's balanced. It's like it follows the was it the Reagan the policy, the fair reporting process. Sorry, fair
right,
reporting act, where I'm assuming I have the act correct, but it was the act that was dissolved by the Reagan administration, of providing a balanced perspective.
right.
And you know, having read the Atlantic piece, having read, not read, listened to the presentation that Jeff did on PBS and NPR, fairly factual, honestly. Very little commentary, honestly.
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I listened to it, before our recording today, and he didn't really slay anyone. He just was like, I don't know why I'm on this. Um, this is making me uncomfortable. I need to let somebody know that I'm on this and I probably shouldn't be. And then he says, I self-remove myself from the thing. So I think for what he could have done, the potential that could have could have happened here. I mean, he would have been well within his rights to just put everything out there and be like, the administration sent me this, now I'm reporting it, right? Um, I didn't know it was classified information. They sent it to me, right? And he would have been well within his rights to do that, and everything could have been public knowledge and everything like that. I commend him for, recognizing what was going on, realizing this is a serious issue, going through the proper channels and reporting it, and then self removing himself out of there. Um, but I think again, I mean, this is a major breach in protocol and operational security. He should be reporting this. I mean, whether you agree with his political views or his publication at all,
There's
he
a
does. He needs to make people aware that, listen, this happened to me. Is this, this is kind of an issue. Go back and check all your group chats. Make sure that you don't have, phantom, people on your group chats that are getting information that they shouldn't be. Secondly, get the hell off a Signal if you're talking about official business. Get on the government's approved app. I think the way he approached this and everything that he did, I think he did exactly what we would expect somebody to do given the magnitude of the information and what was occurring. So, I know people have their opinions about the Atlantic and the editor in chief, but I think he did exactly what he was supposed to do in this one.
Yeah, I think people need to, be mindful to focus on the issue and not focus on the distractions of the
Right,
situation.
right,
And
right.
the issue and the concern is that national security conversations are being had and held on a commercial application, and there was a massive failure in operational security twice, not once, twice. Once is having those classified confidentials conversations in there while also not observing the fact that someone was not supposed to be in there
Yeah.
as well.
And we don't have all the details. We don't know how he got added. We don't know if it was an accident, if it was on purpose. We just, but the fact of the matter is, we're here now. He was added, he was getting information 2, 3 hours before the purported strikes in Yemen. Um, and based on what he reported, there was a lot of information on round pairing, like what type of munitions we were going to use against what targets. That's a big no-no. We definitely don't want that out there. And it might be out there now that I mean, we don't know who else was on the group chat. We know he self-reported. There could have been someone else on there that we didn't know about, right? We don't know. But I mean, it's just there's so much wrong with the scenario. Um, and, but we kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, this could happen. This is not an uncommon, like, out of the ordinary event that could happen to any one of us, right? I mean, people get added. I get added to group chats, on WhatsApp and other things that I don't want to be a part of myself, remove myself out. But I think when you consider, like, from a security perspective, like, what's like, are you monitoring your assets? Are you monitoring group chats, threads? Like, what are your people talking about? Is somebody on there that shouldn't be, right? I mean, this is a very, like, Signal's a very common use method of communication. It's
Yeah.
not like Signal's not widely adopted. A lot of people use it because of the security that they claim, and it's a secure messaging app. It's more secure than, say, WhatsApp or iMessage and things like that. But as you and I both know, nothing is 100% secure, especially if you invite the wolf into the house.
Well,
it,
I think this is a good time here to just say some of the jokes that have been popping up
I mean,
on the various social media spheres.
we kind of have to. I mean, we have to at this point. I mean, because like I said, this is an unforced error. This is an unforced error. This is like shooting yourself in the foot twice. And I mean, like the administration, everyone, even if you're the most, like I said, even if you're the most ardent MAGA supporter, you got to look at this and be like, wow, that was it's like watching your football team, you know, punt the football into the stands, or the quarterback throws an interception to a guy wearing the completely opposite color jersey that's wide open, completely missing. I mean, it's like you're giving everyone an opportunity to blow you up at this point. You know what I mean? You gave it, and so please indulge us, Josh. Please indulge us.
All right. So I credit Marcus Hutchinson's, aka Malware Tech, the guy who stopped WannaCry. So he started a chain, and the jokes just started rolling on this one.
Oh man.
Oh, it's bad. Some of these are just bad. All right. So Marcus wrote, TSSCI means information must be transmitted over text or signal with some civilians invited. Another person wrote, Elif said OpSec equals optional security.
Oh wow.
Someone also wrote, OpSec means other people see every comment. OpSec, don't you mean oops sec?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oops, sec. I like it.
I think one of my favorite ones was that OPSEC is obviously Putin sees every conversation, which kind of, and then there's also the SCIF or the SCIF is signal chat information fountain. And it just gets pretty bad after that. But it just kind of makes you kind of go, wow. And
Yeah.
by the way, on the Putin comment, by the way, and I don't think people actually, this was a small CBS byline, by the way, that I think it may have missed, but it was talked about in today's hearing. We're recording on March 25th, by the way. Um, but it was on this morning's hearing before, I think, the Senate Intelligence Committee. It came to light that uh, Middle East envoy Woodcock was in Moscow at the time, and he got added to the group chat while in Moscow. And it's like, wow. Like if it was international borders and everything, like it's like national borders, like domestic, one thing. But now we're talking international. So it kind of makes you wonder like how many other people or countries may have potentially been seeing the conversation as the data was going across the wire between different routers before it hit Mr. Witkoff's phone.
Oh man. Um, so I mean, I'm reviewing what the White House's comments are about this. Now, the White House is saying, so they initially, and here's the thing, and like I said, we got to hold the government accountable, irrespective of what side of the political spectrum you fall on, right? Um, and so when we look at this, the White House initially says no, this isn't true. We're going to confirm it. They later come back and say, no, actually, wait, you know what? Actually, there is validity to this. We're looking into it. Okay, fine. But we have to, I don't think people truly grasp, the gravity of this is that, you have JD Vance, vice president, right? Pete Hegseth, current defense secretary, Michael Waltz, who believes national security advisor, Steve Witkoff, Stephen Miller, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and a couple other dudes that I don't know exactly what the roles are. Shame on me. But
Don't
the
forget the director of the CIA was there too.
yeah, Director of CIA. So Stephen Miller, Senior Trump Advisor. My bad. And then Steve Witkoff is the special envoy to the Middle East that you were mentioning. So the issue here, the big issue here is these are senior administration officials. These are guys who are part of the National Security Council, and they're having a sidebar conversation where they're discussing things. Now, the White House has stated, I don't know if it's confirmed, but they're saying that there was no classified information or war plans submitted in the signal chat. Fine. Okay. That's that's good to hear. However, we have this stuff called controlled unclassified information, CUI. Now, why is that important? Why does everyone need to know that? Because controlled unclassified information is like proprietary information, that if it gets out, it's yes, it's not classified. It's not going to compromise a intelligence program or an intelligence capability, which is why we classify a lot of information. Is it's not so much the information itself, it's how we collected it. So, if we have a capability that we don't want the enemy to know that we have the ability to collect on specific information, then that information typically becomes classified due to the means of collection or the sources that provided the information. That's why we classify and we protect the sources and means. If a lot of our audience probably understands that, but for the ones who don't, sources and means is typically why information is classified. However, when we take unclassified information and we collate it and we tie it to specific operations or we tie it to specific countries, targets, we're now, the collation of this information gives away specific capabilities, right? And so my concern here is they were talking about controlled unclassified information or information that, had it gotten out, could have been used to essentially counteract capabilities that the Defense Department has. It's probably spent millions of taxpayer money dollars to develop and plan, right? So all that potentially all that is compromised at this point, meaning that we no longer have the effectiveness of these capabilities, right? And so all these guys should have known that. I mean, several of these individuals, with the exception of Pete Hegseth, have worked in the government before. They've worked in the classified space before. They're aware of this stuff. They understand how this process works. They understand what should be happening. To your point earlier, when that CUI information starts coming across a group thread, somebody should have chimed in and said, "Hey guys, like we need a cease and desist right now. We need to take this to another medium. We're veering into dangerous territory about what we're discussing right now on this platform." It doesn't sound like that happened. It doesn't sound like anybody shot the red flag up and said, "Hey guys, like we're veering into something that we don't want to be discussing on this. We got to move this to other comm device, into another setting." And that's concerning, right? That's concerning to me that they either didn't recognize what they were getting into when it came to the discussion, the topics of the discussion, or they did and they just willfully didn't care, right? Both concerning to me, right? It's like, putting dudes into harm's way, you're dropping bombs, you're putting pilots at risk here. Like maybe we need the light bulb should have gone off to somebody, right?
Yeah.
It didn't, or if it did, they just didn't care. So I mean, it's concerning. It's very concerning.
Well, I think the other issue too is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these plans, war plans, even the unpublished ones, they are supposed to be classified until, way down the line, whenever someone decides to declassify them.
Typical declassification is 25 years.
Yeah.
So that's typically what happens is you create it's called an op plan. You create an op plan. And why is this important? Why should everyone be concerned about this? Well, you create the op plan and a contingency plan, and you have people paired to that plan for a reason, because they're constantly looking at the problem and ensuring that that plan is still viable, right? And so you have an investment in that plan. That plan is essentially, when you're in the situation room, you're presenting multiple options to the president to for specific outcomes. It's like, what outcome do you want, Mr. President? Okay, we have a plan for that. We have a plan for this outcome or whatever. These are the options that you have on the table, right? Well, if those options get compromised, the effectiveness of that plan is now compromised, right? So you know, you're you're devaluing the ability of a sitting president to execute an option for the benefit of the American people, right? And so, yeah, it is humorous that a group chat got leaked, and we can make jokes about it, and we do, and we're gonna have a laugh. But ultimately, we have to look at this from a big picture about national security and safety, right?
Right.
That's potentially, I don't know what was on the group chat, right? And I don't know what was put out there, how much of that collation, potentially is out in the wild. Maybe nothing, maybe something. Obviously, the editor in chief of the Atlantic still has it on his phone, right? So, depending on what that information was, we don't know how effective that plan will be in the future. And like any adversary, adversaries adapt, right? So if they know what you're planning on doing, if they know your next three chess moves, they will adapt to the chess move and prevent that from happening, right?
Yep.
Uh, and so this is kind of like when we look at the big picture, this is not a good look, right? It's not a good look. And I'll say this, I mean, I was in Afghanistan in 2019, and 2021 we pulled out, and it was very clear the plan was leaked. The plan was like the op plan either wasn't there, or whatever plan we did have was the Taliban had it and they knew what was going on, and ISIS had it and knew what was going on. And they knew it, they were able to execute very well against that. So, and I was very critical of the Biden administration for that operation, how that went sideways. So it'd be wrong of me not to be critical of this and saying, hey, what the hell, guys? This is ridiculous. So um, it's one of those things where it's people are like, oh, it's just a signal chat, it's just group, but it's not. I mean, we're talking about people's lives on the ground who are potentially at risk. We're talking about pilots flying through the air through hostile countries to do things that are now at risk, right? I mean, this is a serious issue. This is bad juju, not good, right? And so, um, despite there not being you know, classified information, there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from these communications. Plus, here's the other thing: we have in the CIA, in every other foreign intelligence entity, they collect on key leaders' personalities and the relationship between different key leaders in an administration. Seems like, based on this group chat, what was going on, they're getting a lot of key personality information about how these guys interact with each other, which, again, it's not classified, but it's controlled unclassified information. We don't want adversaries to know who has what influence with who. They now become targets for collection. And a point that I make on this is the leverage piece, right? If you know somebody has a weakness, or you know somebody has some type of tension with somebody within an administration, you now have a leverage point, right? You can now leverage that to potentially compel them to do something or not do something, or compel people on their staff to do something, right? So this is a bigger deal than I think people are recognizing outside of the war plan and the discussion of this a couple hours. I mean, there's a lot of issues here. I'll do this. Like, imagine if we'll just take the government aspect out of it, the political aspect out of it. Imagine if this was a group chat between the C-suite of a major Fortune 100 company, right? That a reporter got added to. What would the stock price look like right now, potentially?
In the toilet.
You know what I'm saying? So it has reverberating effects. When you don't practice good OpSec, there's potential like this kind of information getting out there, right?
It does. And I actually want to point out, you bring up something, and it just spawned a thought, and I don't want to lose it real quickly. They did this once, as in today, as in, whenever they did, like early March 18th, 15th, whatever. But, if they did it then, what's not to say they did it previously too?
But exactly. We
It's
we
a,
don't know the extent of this damage.
Yeah, and it's not like they just, oh, hey, everyone, let's get on Signal today, let's start talking about war plans. There may be another point. It wouldn't surprise me that they did this again, and I would love to do the forensics on these phones right now, just to pick apart like who had these conversations and when and to what degree and everything like that. I would just love to just see what was talked about.
Well, remember when Hillary Clinton had a private server, right? In the emails, people went completely crazy on the right side of the political spectrum. Even people in the middle and the left were like, "What the hell are you doing?" Right? This is close to that situation.
I think it's worse. I think that's in the same category
It's the
because
same category,
yeah,
exactly. It's the same category. I mean, this is a huge OpSec violation,
yeah.
huge breach, right? So
Except the only difference though is, post mortem, I think if I remember correctly, Hillary Clinton, after a review of her email server, they found no classified information at that time. But I think there was at least one report that said some information did get classified later down the line,
yeah, yeah.
which was very different. It had to be classified at the time. This is different in a sense. I think it may be a step further because the information is most definitely classified at that time, and they're having those conversations in a insecure, uncontrolled manner.
Well, there's an old adage in the military: loose lips stink ships, right?
Oh,
And
World
so
War II saying.
yeah, like the point is you don't have these conversations in a public forum. You don't discuss these things in a public median in a way people can be discussed, and it's one of those situations where it's like, also in the military, it's lead by example, right? So what is it? What kind of example are we showing here when we do something like this as the top of the Defense Department or the intelligence community, where we're having a group chat about sensitive things on an app? And to get it, like Signal is used quite a bit. It is much more secure than other apps, but I don't think any of us feel comfortable with this type of discussion or this type of information being out there on Signal. I know I don't. I mean, I definitely used Signal a lot when I was in the Marines, but it was more for, we weren't talking about this type of information. It was like, hey, you know, where's the platoon at, man? Like, they were supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. Like, why aren't they here yet? Right. Like, and it's fine. I don't see an issue with that. You got to do your coordination internally. It's a great way to communicate, keep people updated. It's a good tool, but it's also like, you know, where was, where were the advisors like, hey, you don't want to use Signal for that. Like we have a secure messaging app, and there's several sanctioned secure messaging apps the US government uses. So that's why it kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's like, why didn't you use one of those that we know is secure, that's actively being monitored for breaches and things like that? Like, doesn't make any sense.
I'm just thinking right now, Oprah Winfrey going, "You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car." I'm thinking now is you get some national secrets, you get some national secrets, you get some national secrets. Everybody gets some national secrets.
I mean,
That's what I'm thinking right now.
I guarantee you on the secure messaging app, you don't inadvertently add reporters, right? That doesn't happen. So it's mind-boggling to me that instead of talking about strikes on Houthi targets, and we're talking about the group chat right today versus what actually got hit. I think most people don't even know what got hit. Most people are like, "What Houthi targets got hit? What? Okay, group chat. Ooh, juicy." Like, that to me is the sad part here. We had pilots who put themselves in harm's way, and we're focusing on the group chat, right?
Yeah, and I think this is the hard part. Like my biggest struggle here is the unforced error, but the other part right now I'm taking quite a bit of offense to right now. A little bit, I'm going to be very honest, offense to is not recognizing there was an error. So they just kept stringing it along. I mean, don't get me wrong, the first couple hours or the first day or so like that, if you want to say I don't know, like I'm not familiar, or Let me get back to you about that kind of deal. I'm okay with that. But right now, it's been pretty much more or less confirmed when your own National Security Council says these messages appear to be genuine and authentic. That's pretty much in the category of okay, you guys had a conversation, and at that point, it only validates what you know Jeff has is saying that it's true. You guys are talking about stuff that he's not supposed to be talking about, and there's nothing I've heard to this moment. Yeah, even in this morning's hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee, that makes me comfortable or inspires confidence in the leadership right now. I would dare say, if I had the parliamentary power to call no confidence, I'd be there right now. I would be literally calling for no confidence right now because, you're not demonstrating leadership for one to um, wisely making decisions, like having a conversation signal. You lack the demonstration and wisdom to uh, no, hey, maybe we need to stop here and we need to move to a more, restrictive measure or sorry, a more secure means of communication. And then three, when you make a mistake, you don't owe up to your mistake. You just, downplay it and just say, oh, it wasn't a big deal. No, I'm sorry. There's three consecutive leadership failures here on the same exact incident. And it just goes me telling me, why should we trust you with the men and women's lives who serve our country on the front, on the military? Why should we trust you with our nukes and nuclear launch codes? Why should we trust you with leading our government? And if it was one thing too, if it was a an accidental error because you've never held a place in government. But we're talking about Senator Marco Rubio, who's been a long-term senator. We're talking about Tulsi Gabbard, who's also been, I believe, a senator or House of Representative. We're also talking about what's his name? I forgot. JD Vance, who's a 1 or 2 term senator or whatever like that, or 1 or 2 year senator, who would also have the clearances and stuff like that, and who should know better. So I'm sorry, but you have at least three voices in there with congressional experience and sits on various committees who also understands the importance of security clearances. And not at one point did any of them say this is a problem. We need to stop. So
Yeah.
for me, this is a clear failure, a forced error on on the operational security standpoint. But now I'm thinking processing about it too. This is a forced error in leadership, and the doubling down, if not tripling down, is not helping. And don't get me wrong. By the way, the president of the United States looked like a total fool. And when he was ambushed and sorry, supposedly ambushed, and say, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." I don't think for a second that the president of the United States did not know. I'm very certain the president of the United States knew by then because um, you don't want the president to be ever caught or ambushed by a question by a reporter of that magnitude and size. He had to at least had a 5 minute briefing, say, "Mr. President, we have a concern here. You might be walking into this." I'm no doubt that that happened. So any deniability of saying that, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, would be very surprising given that there was at least a few hours of advance notice before he stepped in front of that press conference.
Well, I would argue that the staffers of all parties on this group chat failed them miserably by not advising them not to use the group chat. Um, and I'll just deduce that potentially, maybe the president wasn't aware because the staffers seem to be a little lackluster right now.
Oh, I'm not talking about knowing about the chat inside and there. I'm thinking
Oh
more,
yeah, okay. Just
I'm
knowing that
talking
it
about
happened. Gotcha.
after
Gotcha.
it happened and the news story broke. That is public information. So at that point, you would need to know.
Well,
You would want to
you
you
would
would want to
think
brief the president.
you would think the press secretary would be informed and brief the president, communications director, White House communications director would say, "Hey, listen, we got a problem. Here's the response, right? I mean, here's I mean, even a simple like we're looking into it, we're not quite sure what happened. I mean I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that there was I don't know. I don't know the full details. However, I can say that um, it's not a good look either way. Either way, it's not a good look. If you didn't know, you need to have a sit down with your chief of staff and everyone and find out. This would be one of those times that you wake the president up and let him know that you have a problem, Mr. President. Um,
And especially as a president who values his image as much as any other president. I think he values his reputation image. This one's like very clear in my book, a very bad reputational hit.
yeah,
Like
well, I mean, if you
take
run
on water, sink a boat, bad.
if you run on a platform of like, look, we're gonna run a much more efficient government. We're gonna run a better government. We're tired of the mistakes that we saw in the previous administration. We're tired of the mistakes that have happened over the last 30, 40 years throughout government. We're going to be different. We're going to do things better. This is not reinforcing that message. This is a chip away at the credibility, right? So,
Not just
and
that. I mean, the last 2 years, 3 years, maybe how you did calendar, but the last 2, 3 years, the entire argument that of the administration was that, oh yeah, we handle classified information correctly and in every safe way possible related to his first term. And even though there's huge amounts of evidence saying that there's mishandling of classified information, like boxes of TSSCI information sitting in someone's bathroom. No, sorry. At this point, I'm kind of inclined to say you have no idea, what you're saying or what you're doing, because fool me once, shame on me. We're now at fool
I,
me twice, about 3 times in just this one instant in alone. I'm saying it's just shame, shame, shame.
well, shame all. I mean, I think it's shame all around to the intelligence community in general. I mean, this is not, unfortunately, this is not the first national security breach that we've had. Pick your administration, pick your president, going back to probably pre-World War II. Um, this has been a problem, a persistent problem for the intelligence community for several years of people just can't keep their mouth shut. People can't control this information. Whether it's leaks to reporters, deliberate leaks to reporters, whether it's, mishandling of classified information, taking things out, leave them in your house, you know, Bradley Manning or Chelsea Manning, situation, Edward Snowden situation. I mean, the intelligence community has a problem. They have a big problem. It doesn't matter what administration it is. It doesn't matter what political party is. This has been an issue. I mean, we are still combing through the Edward Snowden files, trying to figure out what that damage was like. That that was like 10 years ago. We're still trying to sort through that. Um,
But
so
I think there's something said though that someone who ran on the campaign of law and order, who said that people need to respect national security and classified information, has made a point and built a campaign around it, and then come down the line gets tarred and feathered in the courts for it, never gets prosecuted because the case got dropped, but continues to show that, kind of demonstrates they haven't learned.
yeah, I mean, from what I can take it, the attitude and approach that we're seeing kind of come out from this group chat and even previous activities of the current president, rules don't apply to me. And it's dangerous. It's a dangerous attitude to have, and even for organizations, right? We have OpSec protocols for a reason, because we understand there's adversaries out there who want to do us harm. We understand that they want to get our information, whether it's government information, whether it's private sector information, whether it's personal information, right? Just our personal information. We understand that we do things a certain way for a reason. It's to safeguard, reduce the risk of the adversary obtaining that information and using it to harm us, right? But if you have leadership that doesn't follow the rules, in any organization, I'm not going to just limit this to the government. One, like I mentioned before, leadership by example, right? You're essentially telling your staff that these rules aren't that important. We have them. We're not going to enforce them, right? That's a problem. That's a problem in itself. Number two, you create a environment of complacency, and laziness when it comes to this stuff. So when the crisis happens, you can't effectively resolve the crisis because everyone is complacent. Nobody's aware what the policy is. Nobody has done the crisis action planning or the fire drill because we weren't enforcing these rules. We weren't reinforcing why these are important, right? And it's disheartening, right? It's disheartening because I think all of us collectively want a government that functions properly. I mean, again, irrespective of anyone's political views, we want the government to function properly. We want the information that could harm us or be used to harm us away on, safeguarded on safe servers and safe platforms. So bad guys don't get that and do bad things to our guys and gals, either overseas or here in the United States, right? And we want to know that when there's policies in place that our elected officials or appointed officials are following those policies for the betterment of the functioning of the government, right? And to better serve us. So it's disheartening. It's very disheartening. And I would say that, for any of our friends in corporate security out there that are listening, or cybersecurity, corporate cybersecurity. I mean, this is like this is why you have to enforce a standard. You have to enforce a standard. You have to do the follow-up. You have to make sure that there's a compliance process in place, that people are actually complying to the policies. Because if not, you get situations like this that can be, one, extremely embarrassing, right? Extremely embarrassing for this administration, extremely embarrassing for all parties involved. Which, in my opinion, the state of the world right now, you don't need any more. You don't need any more distractions. You don't need any more embarrassment, right? We've got a lot of things that need to get squared away. Number two, not only is it embarrassing, but it's showcases gaps in our in our government. You know, like, come on, what are we doing? It's like, guys, I mean, we understand that there's some level of government dysfunction with every administration, but this is
Well, no,
this.
no, that's my problem. It's like it's such a huge. It's in a realm unto itself. Like I can't think of any. Maybe I should talk about this in Converge next week at my session. But it's like my problem is the situation is like none of the light bulbs and signals are going
Right.
off, just
But
saying
it's
like danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson.
it's the environment of complacency, right? And we always say complacency kills. And so, this is we always when we give our awareness briefs to our employee groups and things like that, we always say, like, if you see something, say something, right? It doesn't matter the title of the person. It doesn't matter if it's the CEO. It doesn't matter if it's the VP. It doesn't matter. You have to say something. If they're doing something that potentially could compromise the health of the business, you say something. You remind them of the policy. You refresh them. People make mistakes. It's not always intentional, but you have to refresh them. You have to report it, right? So I look at this as like, there's how many staffers are around these guys at all times? You're telling me that these staffers who travel with them didn't see them on a cell phone on a group chat,
Not
or
just that. I think there was some other people too. Like I'm assuming because I'm not seeing the whole chain, but it looks like at some point there was a roll call of some kind, and they say who's representing whom on what event. Like none of these staffers are also like saying, "Hey, problem, problem, problem." None of this is like signaling off too. So like there's like, failures upon failures. This is like my biggest issue with the OpSec, aspect of things. It's like no one has any situational awareness of everything that's happening and unfolding before them in real time.
Right. Well, it's like if the group chat, it's all fun and games until the group chat leaks, right? Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this isn't good, right? But all that could have been avoided. All of this is avoidable, right? And this is, I think, what like the frustration point is for me and a lot of other people. It's like we've got multiple examples for years of bad handling of classified information, bad handling of controlled unclassified information, bad handling of just official communications, communications between members of Congress, between the administration, between members of government that have been leaked. They've been leaked. They've been out there. They've been out there, and it's not as if this isn't a possibility. There should have been well aware of what happens. What are the implications of something like this occurring? And so it's kind of like you shake your head. And we talked about this, a couple months ago on the cybersecurity podcast that we did about like what's it going to take before we really start taking this seriously, right? Before we really start saying, hey, we got to stop being so lazy and complacent with our operational security.
And I think there's something to be said here that, if there's OPSEC failures right now, God knows how many other failures or safeguards have been potentially ripped out as part of the recent reduction in government workforce, potentially.
Uh,
And
and I would argue that, like these are second and third order effects of that, right? When you don't have the proper infrastructure and people or departments for the oversight that you need, things like this could occur, right? And when all this Doge was happening, it's still happening, right? Um, I was concerned about the speed at which they were moving because of this kind of stuff. Because having worked in government for several years, there are lots of corners of the government that are doing things that we don't necessarily like. We don't know what they do down there in the seventh floor. We don't know what they're doing, But the point is, there was something that they were doing that potentially wasn't it wasn't on the surface level. It wasn't we weren't necessarily aware, but maybe that was the group that was securing the comms between members of Congress and members of the administration, so they could have secure messaging apps. We don't know, right? But again, I mean, this is why I thought Doge was moving too fast. I thought she should have been a little bit more deliberate to really understand what everyone is doing and where the value lies. And can we do it better, more efficiently? Great. But is this an office that we actually need for something that we're not quite aware of, right? So it's tough to say, right? I mean,
yeah, and my time in the government, federal government, brief, but you learn a lot. One of the things I learned in the federal government loves its acronym soup.
yep.
So, like, you're telling me that you have good knowledge of everything that's going on in the federal government based on a handful of acronyms that potentially, by the way, are duplicate acronyms of some other program somewhere else. So, like, what the heck? Like, how do you know better based on your experience if you've never worked inside there in the respective agencies and everything like that? But more to my point here though is I just keep thinking about the order of magnitudes and the order of effects here. You know, I keep seeing red flashing lights like here. It's like there's so many red flashing lights and klaxons just blaring like guys like this is really bad. Like there's other stuff here that that falls in the category of what could possibly go wrong. This is definitely in that category of something that went really 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 wrong.
Well, here's the irony of this whole situation. Like Pete Hegseth, and I don't know him personally, but during his confirmation hearing and public comments that he made, one of the things he kind of was making the case for is that we have too much annual training in the military. We too much of this just training that we every service member is required to do. One of these things, and one of the most hated, I promise you, one of the most hated trainings was the cyber awareness training. The guy with the spiky hair and the blue sweater. We all hated doing that course because it's like a 2 hour course and it's just poorly made and everyone hates it. It's like, don't put the flash drive in the computer. Don't open the suspicious email. All this nonsense. Make sure you know who's on the group chat, right? And he's like, I want to get rid of all this stuff and focus on actual military training and lethality. And it's like, great, that's awesome. But then you personally now just validated why we were doing that training for 10 years, you know, and it's like the irony here. It's like, I'm pretty sure they got rid of that training course, but it's like, like this is why we have to do this stupid training because people continue to do stupid things.
And this is where I like to say my other favorite saying, besides what could possibly go wrong. This is why we can't have nice things.
Crowd can't have nice things. So, but I think there's a big lesson here for any organization. Um, as we're finding more and more, the markets are very sensitive to disruption and excessive information, right? And so when you put information out there unforced like this, the markets will react, right? The markets will react in certain ways. And so when we look at some of this stuff, it's like if you're in a Fortune 100, Fortune 500, or you're a small business or you're scaling your business, right? Maybe you're in a sensitive industry like you're in AI development or you're in oil and gas or looking at you're one of these industries that is looking to scale and there's a lot of potential proprietary information loss would cause a lot of damage to your shareholders or cause a lot of damage to your organization. This is a big lesson here of like, you know what, you may want to go back to that cybersecurity plan. You may want to go back to that asset management plan and have you invested enough to ensure that this stuff doesn't get out, what you guys are discussing, what you're not discussing, because I'm telling you, and you know this way better than I do, the nefarious actors out there, they don't stop. They're going to keep trying to get information. They're going to keep trying to hack your phone. They're going to keep trying to get your personal emails and put them out there for the world to see. And if it tanks your stock price, so be it. They don't care. If it completely means that all your IP is out there for other people to develop, and you didn't want to be an open source company, but now you are. It's very possible, right? So, there's a big lesson here of locking it down, making sure that your key leaders in your organization understand the implications of not having open discussions on unsecure. I don't even want to call it unsecure, but on unsanctioned communication devices, right, or communication platforms. Because I mean, I can tell you, like, this administration really didn't need this embarrassment right now. With all the other stuff going on, price of eggs are still through the roof. A lot of tariff talks are still happening. The markets are starting to move in the right direction, but definitely didn't need this. This was an unforced error that really I think the administration could have gone without. I know all of us could have gone without this. you know.
So let's ask this question here. Okay, two questions. Now we have an incident, a confirmed incident, which is information that has inadvertently escaped the confines of the the PC or whatever the group is called. And then we have confirmed a reporter. Genuinely, you can authenticate everything, and it's been authenticated that the messages happened. So, what I guess to my two questions is, in your opinion, how should the government or anybody respond to an incident like this? And how do you think it will be responded to? So
So
how
yeah, it's a
I should
great
respond
question.
versus how, versus, you know, reality versus idealistic response.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'm doing, is I'm taking everyone's phones and we're doing forensics on everyone's phones. Truthfully, like we have to figure out, okay, who else have you been talking to? What is out there? Has there been any spillage, right? So spillage is when classified information gets out of the network and is out either moved from one network to another where it shouldn't. So you went from like top secret to secret. So top secret information spilled from one side to another, or if it's leaked. The difference here is spillage is it leaves the system, but it's still in the confines of say the government. And then a leak is like, well, it's out in the wild now, right? So I'm taking everyone's phone and figuring out what the hell have you guys been talking about, what's out there, um, and then if they're not using authorized assets by the government, that's the first thing you're going to do. Every one of you're using an authorized, asset. I don't care if you're an iPhone guy and you got to use a Samsung now. Sucks to be you. You've made, you've put me in this position at this point, right? And vice versa, right? So, that's the first thing that I'm going to do and then I'm going to bring everybody in and be like, listen, I understand you guys need to communicate. Here are the two apps you have that we have sanctioned. Use them. And if you come off and you use something else, there's going to be consequences, right? Now, what those consequences are, hard for me to say right now because I don't have all the information on how much what they were talking about and this and that and all that. But I think that the consequences need to be severe, given the potential here, right? It's the potential, right? It's not what occurred. We're not going to punish you based on the actual outcome of the event. It's the potential outcome of the event that I think they need to look at. And I think the consequences need to be severe. They need to be very severe to reinforce the point, right? And then again, I hate to say it, cybersecurity awareness. Everyone's going to sit down and take that stupid course again and get their certificate, right? And again, they've done this to themselves. They've done this to themselves by doing this. So, and I don't know, that like you could make an argument that maybe an advisor or maybe the White House Information Systems team said, "Oh yeah, Signal's fine. You can use Signal to chat," but ultimately that shouldn't have been done. If you can add a reporter to the group chat with all these people and nobody raises the alarm, that in itself is a massive issue. And you need to have assets that have controlled contact information, and that mistake shouldn't happen again. And if it does, it's like, well, at this point, you guys are running a circus, right? You're a bunch of clowns in the circus at this point. If it happens a second time, happens once, okay, like not good, and we're gonna slay you, and we're gonna hold you accountable. And all that happens twice, same thing. Oh no, like at that point, I would be asking for people's resignation letters, because at that
I
point, it's embarrassing people.
I thought there was like I thought it was an implied. And granted, I've never gone to security clearance, even though I've started that process filling out the SF-86. But I always thought the rule was that there is like a zero tolerance for leaking out classified information.
It depends. I mean, I've held several security clearances. I had one for almost 22 years. So there's an intentional leak, right? You intentionally leak the information. You knew what you were doing, and you did it anyway, and that falls into a separate category. Then you did something, like, for example, maybe you um accidentally brought your cell phone into the skiff. You forgot it was in your pocket, and you realize, oh shit, I have my phone on my in my pocket in the skiff. You self-reported, and you're like, hey, I made a boo-boo. Um, that's a different scenario than like, yeah, I'm gonna bring it in. I'm gonna bring my phone to a sensitive area, lay it down, hit the record button, and record conversation. Like it's two different scenarios. One was like I intentionally did something. One is it was unintentional, but it still caused damage, right? Um, so in those cases, they're handled differently, right? Because of the intent behind the action, right? So you would go about it differently, but to your point, that we retain all records. So if you get it's called a security violation. You have a security violation, it's logged in your file. So you consistently have security violations. Your clearance is up for it can be revoked, right? It's like, well, this person just is clearly unable to follow the rules. We're going to revoke their clearance, deny them access to the classified information anymore, and you're done. Like you're out. Now, a very egregious act of even if it's an accident can lead to like you're out. Like we're cutting off your clearance. And here's why this is important. Once you lose your clearance in the intelligence community, a full revocation, you no longer have access to the premises anymore. Let alone your terminal and the skiff. You can't even come to the building anymore. You're not allowed. Like you're excommunicado. You know what I mean? Persona non grata. Bye. And then you have to go through a very long process to petition to get your clearance back, which could take several years. And most people, when they get to that point where they've lost their clearance, it's been revoked completely. You pretty much go find other work to do. You don't work in the intelligence community anymore because it's such a pain to try to get your clearance back. And this is one of those things where Sebastian Gorka during the Bush administration, I think he was denied. They wanted to bring him on as an advisor, and then again during the Trump administration, but because of all his foreign ties and everything like that, he could not. He could not be granted a security clearance, and as such, he was only allowed to come do guest lecturing on certain events. Based on his inability, like they just the clearance the clearance granting authority for the government was like, no, he's just too many foreign contacts. We're not going to give it to him. So he basically he was unable to really do any work for the government. And there was talks about him coming working for this administration, and they're like, we can't get him a clearance. He's unclearable based on his past history and his foreign contacts and his foreign connections. We can't. We're not going to, in good conscience, give him a clearance. So that it really limits your ability to work in several spaces, right?
So, do you believe that this is going to be one of the situations where there's just going to be a slap on the wrist, or there's going to be some shakeups?
It's tough to say. The current president never worked in the government outside of his previous administration, his previous term 4 years ago. I don't know how much, how much of a priority OpSec is for him. To be honest, and it's not neither good nor bad. I just don't, I don't know if this rises on his radar as something that's even worthy of discussion. I don't know where he falls on that. I know in the Bush administration, security violations were a death nail. Like if you got a security violation, they assumed that you were giving information to the enemy at that point, and you were pretty much going to get a revocation of your clearance if it was deemed necessary. So every president is different on how they prioritize this type of stuff. What I would hope is that there's an investigation. There is a clear determination of what was put on that group chat? Could it have been controlled and classified information? What is the damage with what has been released? What is the damage to national security based on just what has been released? And then make a determination based on that. At a minimum, I would assume that every one of these people on the group chat would have an entry made in their file of a security violation and some type of you know counseling, administrative counseling on that. Um, it's tough to say if that's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to see any shakeups based on this. I think we're going to have some strong talking tos. Um, I at a minimum, I would hope assets are brought in and new assets are issued and forensics is done. But here's the thing: when we go that route, we start finding more stuff, right? We start finding more things that are potentially damaging. And so what then is the question? What then? Now that potentially there's going to likely be an investigation into this. There's likely going to be an investigation as to what was put out there, what was on the phones, what other information was there, and what next, right? What's going to happen next? I mean, ultimately, it's politics, right? So when you become nuclear to the administration, when you become radioactive, typically administrations will just cut you and say goodbye. Like we're going to cut ties. You're just you're too radioactive for us to have on the team right now, right? So I think it really depends on what else is found, or what is there, and then how much trust and confidence does the president have in his staff? If we just go off of his previous administration and we look to see the turnover that happened there, he had no problem firing people for minor infractions. So if we just look at past behavior as an indication of future behavior, then it's likely to say if there's something egregious enough, he has no problem firing people, sending them packing, and bringing in new people. And now that he's been elected, and if we just look at the political chess game here, now that he's been elected, you could technically run on a platform of I'm going to have these people on my staff, I'm going to have them confirmed. Now that you've been elected, they've been confirmed. You can kick people out the door and bring people on an interim basis, right? And then we're worry about a confirmation later on. So that's also a play that could happen here, right? I think ultimately there was a lot of deliberate planning on who they wanted in the administration this time around, and they didn't want as many shakeups and turnover as they had last time. So I don't know if this itself is going to get anybody removed, but I think if this happens again, I wouldn't be surprised if people, I wouldn't be surprised if the staff was if he just cleaned house and so it was like, all right, you guys are making a mess of things. And look, to President Trump's credit, I mean, as he ran a business, he had no problem removing people who were not performing or not doing what he wanted done. So, you know, I don't think he plays the political game the same way as other politicians do. I think he has no issue firing somebody and sending them on their merry way if he doesn't believe that they can do what he needs them to do or if they become too radioactive. I will say Pete Hegseth had a very contentious confirmation hearing. There was a lot of people who were not excited, even within DOD, of him being the new Secretary of Defense. Again, I don't know Pete Hegseth personally. I never served with him. I don't know how he's doing as Secretary of Defense. So on a personal, I don't know him, but just going off the facts that we know, he was not the top choice by a lot of people in Washington D.C. to head the Department of Defense. So, it he could be going away. We don't know.
Right. Okay, folks. So, oof, what a loaded episode for this week. And believe me, there's a lot more, a lot more that's coming in the future weeks. I think we're just barely getting started, honestly, unpacking everything. This is just what 24 hours into this.
24 hours into this. So, I mean, I think the true fallout, we're not going to know for a few more weeks. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be a juicy group chat, unfortunately. And I say that like, this is just a distraction that like, I don't think any of us really needed or wanted, but now it's here and we have to be objective about it and look at it like, oh God, like why this is why. Okay, so we said this before, right? Why is executive protection good? And we saw what happened in New York City, right? Why is OpSec good? Why is good OpSec practices good? Now we have that example, right? So, unfortunately, we have these methods and means in place for a reason, right? So, one, your CEO doesn't get murdered in broad daylight outside the hotel before the board meeting, and so the group chat with the national security advisor, the department, the Secretary of Defense, Director of National Intelligence, and Secretary of State doesn't get leaked out in a public arena, right?
Yeah. So I think that's gonna be a top tip at the day. Have good executive protection, have good OPSEC.
Yeah, good OPSEC, good EP.
All right. Any final thoughts?
Practice good OPSEC, folks. Practice good OPSEC. Make sure you know who's on your group chat.
Well, my top tip is start making popcorn. That's going to be my final thought
Well,
because
I mean,
we're just barely getting started.
this is a political, just like, you know, a, I mean, I'm going to be a little ironic. It's a political bomb that blew up in the administration's face, and I mean, they're gonna get taken to town for it. I mean, and it's an unforced error. I mean, so yeah, the popcorn is probably warranted on this one.
All right, folks. We're a little over this week only because this to unpack everything, you look at the various dynamics on leadership and the concentric failures, by the way. And the failure to these concentric failures is now we have a bombshell
Yeah,
moment here.
yeah.
So
I mean,
welcome to another incident here, by the way, folks.
use it as a lesson for your own organizations. You better be looking at everyone's group chats on official comms and make sure they're not talking about, things that they shouldn't be talking about.
Yeah.
So, well, and I say one more point too. There, there was this huge uproar earlier on when this administration took over about some of the text messages and chats from members of the intelligence community, right? And it was LGBTQ focused, right? Um, and I agree it was probably inappropriate for a government system, but there was a huge uproar. Those employees were slayed, they were fired, removed, out, right? And then we have this. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, get the popcorn, keep the popcorn warm and watch because I think this is going to play out in the political arena and it's going to be just a big circus.
I think we might need a movie's theater's worth of popcorn at this rate.
Yeah, I mean, this is
You can't make this stuff up. I'm sorry. This is like entertainment 101. Like this is gonna be the summer blockbuster.
I mean, it's scratching my head like how like why? What were you
Hey,
guys thinking? Like
hey, remember Al? What could possibly go
what
wrong?
could possibly go wrong? Oh my God.
Anyways, folks, that's it for this week. We'll try to catch you guys next week on the show floor or something like that for a little bit. If not, then you'll see us definitely in 2 weeks. Until then, I'm Josh,
I'm Al.
and we'll catch you next time.
All right, guys.